You didn't click on this video by accident. You clicked because you're exhausted by the quiet war in your own mind. You're tired of questioning every decision before you even take it. Tired of holding yourself back even when you know there's more in you. More to say, more to live, more to give. You've probably whispered to yourself 100 times, "I just need confidence." You've watched the motivational speeches, repeated affirmations in the mirror, told yourself to just believe. But if confidence were the cure, why does the doubt keep coming back? Why does your chest tighten before you speak in a meeting? Why does hesitation creep in before you try something new? Why does silence win when you want to share your heart with someone you love? That's because self-doubt isn't healed by louder words. It isn't erased by shouting positivity over fear. Self-doubt is learned. And if it was learned, it can be unlearned. You don't need another dose of shallow motivation. You need understanding. You need to know what self-doubt really is, why it began, and how to dismantle it at its roots. This isn't about tricks or clickbait. It's about truth. By the end of this journey, you'll see where your doubt was born and how to take back the voice you gave away. So let's begin with the first question. Why do you doubt yourself at all? As children, we didn't walk around worrying about judgment. We sang without shame, we asked questions without fear, we stumbled without hesitation. We were open, curious, bold. So what changed? At some point, someone's words made you turn inward. A teacher corrected you in front of everyone. A parent made you feel love was conditional on being quiet, perfect, or obedient. A friend laughed when you showed emotion or passion. Or maybe you failed at something small and no one told you failure was not the end. That's when the seeds were planted. Not in adulthood, not in big failures, but in those small moments when you were still learning who you were. If your truth was punished, you learned to hide it. If your joy was mocked, you dimmed it. If your voice was ignored, you began to question its worth. And over time, a quiet echo formed inside. Maybe I shouldn't speak. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'll ruin it if I try. That echo was never yours at the beginning. It was borrowed. But repetition turned it into habit. And the habit became your second skin. Carl Jung called this the persona, the mask we wear to survive. We hide parts of ourselves to gain approval or avoid pain. But the more we hide, the more we lose contact with who we truly are. And in that gap between who we are and who we think we must be, self-doubt thrives. The more you perform, the less you trust. The more you hide, the more you fear being seen. And the more you fear being seen, the stronger the doubt grows. Self-doubt doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. It shows up in overthinking, in perfectionism, in procrastination. It sounds like I'm just not ready, I'll do it tomorrow, maybe later. But underneath it all lies the same truth. You're not trusting yourself. Here's the paradox. Self-doubt was never just weakness. At one point it was protection. When you were young and rejection cut deep, your mind built a shield. If I question myself first, maybe I can avoid being hurt later. If I hold back, no one can laugh. If I stay quiet, no one will leave. It was a system designed to keep you safe. But what once protected you now imprisons you. Jung reminded us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Self-doubt is that unconscious system. It's not evidence of your failure. It's a signal from an old version of you that needs updating. Think of the voice in your head. It says you're not smart enough, you're too late, someone else has already done it better. The mistake is trying to fight that voice with forced positivity. The better path is to question it. When did I first hear that? Whose voice does it sound like? Is this truly mine or one I inherited? When you begin to separate yourself from the voice, something shifts. You realize, I have doubt, but I am not doubt. I hear that voice, but it is not my truth. I feel afraid, but fear is not always right. That gap, that space between the thought and the truth, is where freedom begins. So the first step is not to kill the voice, but to notice it. Not to drown it in affirmations, but to trace it back to its source. Because the moment you see where it came from, you realize it never belonged to you in the first place. This is the beginning of reclaiming your life from the roots of doubt. Inside every one of us lives a voice. It does not shout from the outside, it whispers from within. It tells you you are not enough, not ready, not worthy. It convinces you that safety lies in silence and perfection. And even though you hate its tone, you obey its rules. This voice is what psychologists call the inner critic. It is not your true self, but it wears your voice so well that you cannot tell the difference. It borrows its lines from parents, teachers, culture, and old wounds, and then it repeats them until they feel like truth. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." The inner critic thrives precisely because you have not looked inside. You treat its whispers as reality instead of illusion. You let it script your choices instead of questioning its authorship. The inner critic is clever. It does not only attack, it pretends to protect. It says, "Don't try, you'll fail." But beneath that lies, "Don't try, you won't be humiliated." It says, "Stay quiet, you'll sound stupid." But beneath that lies, "Stay quiet, you won't be abandoned." It says, "Wait until you're perfect." But beneath that lies, "If you are flawless, no one can hurt you." And so you listen, because the critic frames itself as safety. But it is safety that costs you life. The illusion of the inner critic is that it feels rational. It uses logic, comparisons, worst-case scenarios. It makes you believe you are being wise, cautious, prepared. But in reality, you are only rehearsing pain that has not yet happened. Think about it. How many times has the critic predicted disaster that never came true? How many moments of joy were stolen because the critic convinced you to hold back? How many dreams did you abandon before they even had a chance to live? Nietzsche once wrote, "The snake which cannot cast its skin has to die." As well, the minds which are prevented from changing their opinions, they cease to be mind. The inner critic is exactly that uncast skin. It clings to you long after its protection has expired. It keeps you trapped in outdated fears, unable to shed them for growth. And yet we rarely challenge it. We believe its authority. Because it speaks in our own voice, we forget it is only an echo. It is not prophecy, it is memory. A memory of rejection, shame, or fear, replayed until it feels permanent. The critic convinces you that by doubting yourself first, you will be prepared for others' doubt. But the truth is you only live the rejection twice. Once in your imagination, once in reality, if it even happens at all. The critic convinces you that playing small is safe. But the truth is, playing small only guarantees regret. Jung warned us again, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. The critic exists to prevent that acceptance. Because if you accepted yourself fully, it would lose its purpose. So it keeps you doubting, adjusting, apologizing, striving for a perfection that does not exist. The critic is not your enemy, but it is not your guide either. It was built to protect a younger you, not to guide the adult you have become. And until you see it as illusion, it will keep steering your life. So how do you break free? First, by noticing the critic in real time. Catch its phrases, write them down, study them. Ask, whose voice does this sound like? Is this my wisdom or someone else's fear? Second, by testing its predictions against reality. If it says, "You'll embarrass yourself," try and see. If it says, "No one will care," speak and notice who listens. Reality is often kinder than the critic will ever admit. The third step is compassion. Not toward the critic, but toward yourself. Remember that the critic formed to protect you from pain. Thank it for trying, but remind it you no longer need that kind of protection. You can face pain now without erasing yourself. Nietzsche also said, "Become who you are." The critic keeps you from that becoming. It chains you to old scripts, old fears, old identities. Breaking free is not about silencing it forever. It is about refusing to mistake its voice for truth. You cannot stop the critic from whispering, but you can stop letting it decide. And the more you live despite its warnings, the weaker it becomes. It is like a shadow that vanishes in direct light, and the light is your awareness. The critic may say you are not enough, but the moment you stop obeying, you discover something powerful. You never needed its permission to live. Perfectionism is praised in our culture. We call it ambition, excellence, high standards. We put it on resumes as if it were a strength. But beneath the glossy surface lies fear. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of not being enough. Perfectionism is not the pursuit of mastery. It is the obsession with control. It is not about doing your best. It is about avoiding the shame of doing less than perfect. Carl Jung once said, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another." There is no recipe for living that suits all cases. Perfectionism ignores this truth. It demands one standard for all things, one flawless shape that must be achieved. And in chasing that ideal, you squeeze yourself into roles that suffocate your spirit. The trap of perfectionism is that it feels noble. It whispers, work harder, prepare longer, polish more. It convinces you that hesitation is discipline, that delay is wisdom. But in reality, perfectionism is procrastination dressed as virtue. How many projects never left your desk because they weren't ready yet? How many words stayed locked inside you because they weren't perfect yet? How many relationships drifted away because you were too afraid to show your flaws? Nietzsche once wrote, "You must have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star." Perfectionism denies this chaos. It demands order where there should be creativity. It demands certainty where there should be discovery. And in that denial, it kills the very spark it pretends to protect. Perfectionism is fueled by comparison. You measure yourself against impossible standards, against curated lives online, against expectations handed down by family, against achievements of strangers. And no matter what you do, you are never enough. Because enough was never the point. The point was to keep you running, to keep you silent, to keep you small. The perfectionist believes if they achieve flawlessness, they will finally be safe. But flawlessness is a horizon that moves as you walk. You reach one milestone only to see another appear. You complete one task only to notice every detail you missed. And safety never arrives. Jung warned, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. Perfectionism exists to protect you from that pain. It says, if you control everything, you won't have to feel the sting of failure. But in trying to avoid pain, you avoid growth. You avoid life itself. The perfectionist delays joy until conditions are met. I'll be happy when the project is perfect. I'll rest when I've earned it. I'll love myself when I never make mistakes. But those conditions are impossible, so joy never arrives. And your life becomes one long rehearsal with no performance. The illusion is that perfectionism will lead to respect. But respect does not come from flawlessness. It comes from authenticity. People are drawn not to your polish, but to your humanity. Not to your mask, but to your truth. Perfection hides the very qualities that make connection possible. Nietzsche also said, no artist tolerates reality. Perfectionism is exactly that intolerance. It cannot bear the mess, the cracks, the rawness of being alive. And yet it is in the cracks that beauty enters. It is in the flaws that love takes root. It is in the unfinished that creativity breathes. Breaking the trap begins with acceptance, not of mediocrity, but of humanity. To accept that mistakes are not evidence of failure, they are proof of movement. To accept that chaos is not a threat, but a source of creation. To accept that imperfection is not the enemy of excellence, it is the pathway to it. The second step is courage. The courage to release work before it feels ready. The courage to speak even when your words tremble. The courage to show your flaws instead of polishing them away. Because courage invites connection while perfection builds walls. The third step is compassion. For yourself when you stumble. For others when they reveal their flaws. Compassion breaks the cycle of impossible standards. It reminds you that being human was never about being flawless, but about being real. Perfectionism will tell you that anything less than flawless is worthless. But the truth is the opposite. It is the imperfect work, the imperfect words, the imperfect love that changes lives, because it carries the fingerprints of authenticity. The trap of perfectionism will keep calling, but each time you choose presence over polish, you weaken its hold. Each time you choose expression over silence, you step out of its cage. And with each step, you reclaim not only your creativity but your life. Failure has become the monster under the bed of our generation. It hides in the shadows of every decision. It whispers, what if you fall, what if you lose, what if you embarrass yourself? And because the whisper feels like prophecy, we freeze. We convince ourselves that not trying is safer than trying and failing. But here is the truth. Failure itself does not destroy us. What destroys us is the meaning we attach to it. We say, I failed, therefore I am a failure. We say, this didn't work, therefore I am worthless. But failure and identity are not the same. Carl Jung once wrote, I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become. Failure is what happened. It is not who you are. And yet most of us confuse the two, and in that confusion, we surrender our courage. Fear of failure is cunning. It does not always scream, don't try. Sometimes it sounds wise. It says, wait until you're ready, plan more, gather more evidence. It disguises paralysis as preparation. And while you wait, life passes. Nietzsche once said, the secret of reaping the greatest fruitfulness and the greatest enjoyment from life is to live dangerously. To live dangerously does not mean recklessness. It means to risk falling in order to rise. It means to accept that pain and growth are bound together. It means to understand that without the possibility of failure, there is no possibility of transformation. Think of a child learning to walk. They fall, they stumble, they bruise their knees. But no one says you are a failure for falling. We celebrate the attempt because the fall is proof of movement. So why do we stop giving ourselves that same grace as adults? Fear of failure often comes from old wounds. Maybe you were punished for mistakes as a child. Maybe your efforts were mocked, your attempts ignored. Maybe the people around you only celebrated results, never resilience. So you learned that safety lies not in trying but in avoiding. But avoidance has a price. You avoid risk, but you also avoid possibility. You avoid falling, but you also avoid flying. And the longer you avoid, the more failure grows in your imagination until it feels unbearable. This is why small acts of courage are powerful, because reality is often kinder than the fear itself. Jung reminded us, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. Failure is often the pain that awakens us. It strips away illusion, exposes our limits, and forces us to adapt. It is not the end, but the beginning of deeper awareness. Failure teaches in ways success never can. Success feeds the ego, but failure feeds the soul. Success confirms what you already know, but failure expands what you are capable of knowing. Success is pleasant, but failure is transformative. The pain you fear is the very soil where resilience grows. Nietzsche also observed, that which does not kill us makes us stronger. This is not a slogan, it is a truth written in experience. Each time you fall and rise, you gain strength that cannot be learned in comfort. Strength of humility, strength of adaptability, strength of courage. So how do we begin to act despite fear? First, by redefining failure itself. Failure is not the opposite of success, it is part of success. Every attempt that falls short is a step toward mastery. Every mistake is data, every fall is feedback. Second, by practicing smaller risks. Speak when you would normally stay silent. Try when you would normally hesitate. Allow yourself to stumble in safe places so you can build muscle for bigger battles. Courage is not absence of fear, it is movement in its presence. Third, by remembering that the outcome is never the full story. What matters is not whether you win or lose, but whether you grow. The courage to act reshapes you regardless of results. Because even when you fail, you are no longer the same person who was too afraid to try. Fear of failure convinces you that safety is found in waiting. But the deeper truth is that safety is an illusion. Time will pass whether you act or not. Opportunities will vanish whether you risk or not. And regret will grow whether you fail or not. The only real danger is living a life untouched by your own courage. Because at the end of it, you won't remember the failures. You will remember the chances you never took. So the invitation is simple. Do the thing while afraid. Speak while your voice shakes. Try while your hands tremble. Because fear will always be there, but so will possibility. And with each act of courage, the voice of failure grows quieter, and the voice of life grows louder. Comparison is one of the oldest poisons in human history. It has been with us since the moment we noticed someone else had more food, more strength, more attention. And in our modern world, comparison has been amplified beyond recognition. Every scroll, every post, every picture becomes another reminder that someone somewhere is living better, faster, fuller than you. Comparison doesn't just steal joy, it steals clarity. It makes you forget your own path, your own timing, your own worth. It convinces you that success is not about growth, but about being ahead of someone else. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Comparison blinds you to this privilege, because while you are busy measuring your life against theirs, you forget to live yours. You forget that your story was never meant to match their script. Comparison is seductive because it feels like motivation. You see someone running faster and you want to push yourself. You see someone achieving more and you want to try harder. But beneath that surface, comparison is rooted in insecurity, not inspiration. It whispers, if they are ahead, you must be behind. If they shine, you must be dim. If they succeed, there will be less left for you. But life is not a zero-sum game. Another person's success is not your loss. Another person's light does not dim your own. Yet comparison convinces you otherwise, and in doing so, it paralyzes you. Nietzsche once wrote, "At bottom every man knows well enough that he is a unique being, only once on this earth." Comparison makes you forget that uniqueness. It reduces you to numbers, rankings, timelines. It tells you that your pace is wrong, your progress too slow, your dreams too small. And so you chase after shadows instead of building your own ground. Think of the times comparison has stopped you. You wanted to create, but you thought it's already been done. You wanted to share, but you thought theirs is better. You wanted to celebrate, but you thought, not until I catch up. Comparison kills beginnings before they can breathe. The illusion of comparison is that it gives you truth. But what it really gives you is distortion. You never compare your whole life to someone else's whole life. You compare your hidden wounds to their curated highlights. You compare your backstage to their front stage. And in that unfair game, you will always lose. Jung reminded us, wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of the self, but by integration of the contraries. Comparison makes you cut off parts of yourself. You disown your timing, your struggles, your gifts, because they do not look like someone else's. But integration means owning your own shape, your own journey, your own rhythm. The weight of comparison is heavy because it never ends. There will always be someone younger, richer, stronger, smarter. If your worth is measured by being ahead, you will always find yourself behind. And even if you are ahead, the fear of losing that position will rob you of peace. So how do we break free? First, by noticing when comparison arises. Name it, catch it in the moment. Say to yourself, I am comparing. Awareness is the first crack in its spell. Second, by turning comparison into curiosity. Instead of saying, they are ahead, I am behind, ask, what can I learn from them? Instead of, their success means my failure, ask, what part of me is longing to grow? Curiosity transforms envy into guidance, while shame only deepens it. Third, by practicing gratitude for your own path. Not the grand achievements, but the quiet steps. The breath you took this morning. The lessons you have learned that no one can see. The resilience you carry from battles no one else fought. Gratitude shifts your eyes from their light back to your own. Nietzsche also said, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe." Comparison is the voice of the tribe inside you. It tells you to measure yourself by their standards or risk being left behind. But your task is not to outpace the tribe, it is to remain yourself within it. You will feel the pull of comparison for the rest of your life. But each time you return to your own ground, the weight lessens. Each time you honor your own rhythm, the chains loosen. And slowly you discover a deeper truth. That the only person worth comparing yourself to is who you were yesterday. Comparison will try to define you by someone else's script. But courage is writing your own. Not faster, not slower, not better, not worse. Simply yours. We spend much of our lives trying to earn the right to exist. We hustle for approval, we strive for perfection, we measure our worth by achievements and applause. And yet, no matter how much we achieve, the hunger remains. Because the one thing we are truly starving for is self-acceptance. Carl Jung once wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." It is terrifying because it requires us to stop hiding. To stop performing, to stop apologizing, to stop editing the parts of ourselves we think are unlovable. It demands that we stand naked in front of our own soul and say, "This is me and I am enough." Self-acceptance does not mean complacency. It does not mean you stop growing, stop learning, stop striving. It means you no longer tie your worth to growth, learning, or striving. It means your value is not conditional. You are not worthy because you achieved, you are worthy because you exist. The power of self-acceptance is freedom. Freedom from the critic that tells you you are never enough. Freedom from comparison that convinces you others are ahead. Freedom from perfectionism that chains you to an impossible standard. Freedom to be human without apology. Nietzsche once said, "Become who you are." This is the essence of self-acceptance. You are not asked to become someone else, only to unfold into yourself. You are not asked to mimic, only to emerge. And that emergence cannot happen while you are busy rejecting half of who you are. Think about the energy you waste on hiding. The smiles you fake, the words you swallow, the roles you play. How much of your life has been lived as a performance? And how different would your life feel if you could simply be? Self-acceptance is not passive, it is radical. It is an act of defiance in a world that profits from your insecurity. Every advertisement tells you you are not enough without their product. Every algorithm shows you someone supposedly better. Every system thrives on your self-rejection. So to accept yourself is to rebel against the very structure that wants you doubting. Jung reminded us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Self-rejection is often unconscious. It is the voice you inherited from childhood, from culture, from wounds you never chose. To accept yourself means to bring those shadows into the light. To say, yes, I carry scars, I carry flaws, I carry contradictions, but they are mine and they do not diminish me. The paradox is that only when you accept yourself can real growth begin. Because growth born from shame is fragile. It collapses the moment you stumble. But growth born from acceptance is resilient. It endures mistakes, it embraces imperfection, it continues even when progress is slow. Nietzsche also said, "One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star." Acceptance means allowing that chaos, not suppressing it. It means recognizing that your contradictions are not defects, but sources of creativity. It means holding both your darkness and your light without disowning either. So how do we practice self-acceptance in daily life? First, by noticing the ways you deny yourself. Every time you say, "I'll love myself," when you postpone your worth, catch the condition and release it. Second, by speaking to yourself as you would to someone you love. You would not call a friend worthless for stumbling, so why call yourself that? Third, by allowing yourself to be seen. Share your truth, even if your voice shakes, because every time you reveal instead of conceal, you reinforce the belief that you are enough. Self-acceptance is not a one-time event. It is a practice, a daily choice. Some days you will embrace yourself fully. Other days you will fall back into old patterns of rejection. But even then, acceptance means forgiving yourself for forgetting. The power of self-acceptance is quiet, but it transforms everything. When you accept yourself, comparison loses its weight, because you no longer need to measure yourself against others. When you accept yourself, perfectionism loses its hold, because you no longer need to earn the right to belong. When you accept yourself, fear of failure softens, because you no longer tie your worth to outcomes. The world may never fully accept you. People may criticize, reject, misunderstand. But when you accept yourself, their power over you diminishes, because their judgment no longer touches the core of who you are. Acceptance is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of a different kind of living. A life where worth is not earned but owned. A life where joy is not postponed but practiced. A life where being yourself is no longer terrifying but liberating. And in that life, you discover a truth that was always waiting for you. You were never broken. You were never lacking. You were always enough.